We need to have a show.
You're always free.
It's so much fun. One more day together. Everybody loves Mina. Welcome to PTI, everyone. Mike and Tony are still on their RV trip to Yosemite. So I'm joined by my great friend from NFL Live and the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. Mina Kimes, everyone. Kind of a Wednesday, Friday applause. All right, let's get going here. Let's start with wide receiver news from the NFL. The Panthers traded Adam Thielen back to the Vikings, for whom he had 2 Pro Bowl seasons, and Chiefs pass catcher Rashee Rice has accepted a 6-game suspension for his role in a multi-car crash in Dallas in 2024 that left several people injured. Okay, Mina, what's the bigger wide receiver news to you?
I'll go with Rice because he's the more impactful player on the better team. Look, the Chiefs offense obviously went to the Super Bowl last year without him, but Frank, I would argue with him, they can be a top 5 unit again. People forget how good he was in the second half of his rookie season. From that point until the first 3 weeks of last year before he got hurt, he led all receivers league-wide in yards after the catch. They figured out how to use Xavier Worthy. As I said yesterday, Travis Kelce looks good, but Rashee Rice is the #1 receiver in this offense, so his absence is huge. That said, I think the Chiefs are actually happy that it's coming at the beginning of the season because they have some certainty, they can game plan for it, and then they get him back when it matters most.
Yeah, see, now, people like you who live your life and you know the NFL as well as anybody, everyone keeps waiting for the demise of the Kansas City Chiefs, and everyone talks about their wide receivers. When Tyreek Hill wasn't there, everyone told me they weren't going to be that good anymore. They go to 3 straight Super Bowls. You're right. They absolutely need Rice, but they got the guy at quarterback that is head and shoulders above everyone in the league. So it seems to me it's kind of a plug-and-play thing. Whoever they put in there, somehow he makes it work. And when they get Rice back, and I think you're 100% right, it was smart to figure this out now as opposed to later on in the season. So I think they'll be fine. But when you look at Thielen, what's gone on with him, he spent a couple of years with the Panthers. And with Bryce Young, it was important to have a veteran receiver that could kind of help him through his growing pains. You know, the last 10 weeks of the season, Bryce Young played a lot better. I think Thielen had a lot to do with it. Now he goes back to Minnesota, and what do we have? A rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. He's worked out with him the last 2 summers, so something tells me this was probably in the works for a couple of months. And you're getting a guy who wants to be back in Minnesota. Born there, went to college there. His best years were with the Vikings. I think it's a smart move by Minnesota, especially with a young starting quarterback.
A Minnesota team that won't have Jordan Addison, speaking of suspensions, he'll be out for a few games. But you talked about how good Bryce Young was in the second half of the season. You're absolutely right. Thielen was a big part of that. In that second half, he led the team in target share, yards. He caught 80% of Bryce Young's passes, Frank. So while I understand why they traded him, they drafted a receiver in the first round. He looks great. Tyrell McMillan. Little nervous because the development of Bryce Young has been so important for them.
That's right.
And he was the veteran presence in that offense.
Yeah, and it's now what they have left is a young receiving core. So you are taking a bit of a gamble. As for Thielen, think about this. He is, first of all, he's going to probably start, opposite Justin Jefferson in week 1, which, by the way, will be an ABC game against the Bears. But you're talking about a guy, only Randy Moss and Chris Carter have more receptions with the Minnesota Vikings. Those guys are Hall of Famers, so it's pretty darn impressive.
Good company. All right. The NFL opener between the Cowboys and Eagles is a week from tomorrow, and Micah Parsons still hasn't suited up. Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer says that even if a deal gets done with the hold-in before the game, Parsons will probably need a ramp-up plan and probably won't even be able to play every down in Philly. Frank, is it getting a little late for Micah Parsons to play like Micah Parsons in next week's opener?
Yeah, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, and they're going to practice Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, then they'll fly to Philly on Wednesday. So at some point you think he's got to come back. I'm sympathetic to the former players when I hear them talking about it because they know as well as anybody. And you hear guys talk about it would be malpractice if they throw him out there. Well, number one, he is under contract to play. And it is football. This guy is a football player. The fact that he's there every day at camp, he's a world-class athlete. You know that he's keeping himself in shape. And Schottenheimer came out and said he's probably not going to play every play. And I'm going to bring up a name and a guy you know as well as anybody, one of the greatest defensive players of all time. And that's Aaron Donald. 2017, 2018, he doesn't show up for training camp. I don't do training camp. What did he do in 2017? 11 sacks in 14 games. The following year, 20 and a half sacks he had. So I get it. Practice is important. Training camp is important, but great players have a habit of rising to the top.
I'll throw out another name, Chris Jones. Only a couple years ago, you remember, he skipped camp. He held out week 1, watched inside the stadium. Then he comes back, and he has 2 sacks in his first game. He had 7 sacks in his first 5 games. He was fine. Now, that said, NFL players aren't like you, Frank. They can't just roll out of bed, show up looking pretty, smile, and have a great performance. There is a concern about soft tissue injuries at times when guys are thrust into action. That is something to monitor. But I have another question for you.
All right.
This is the opener, right? Obviously, this negotiation is between the Cowboys and Micah Parsons. But at a certain point, if you're the NFL, aren't you a little perturbed that this storyline is going to hang over week 1 if Parsons isn't out there?
Yeah, I think the NFL, as you tell me, would Jerry Jones be perturbed because everyone will be talking about him and Micah Parsons. But you do have the defending Super Bowl champs. This is one of the best rivalries in the sport. So you're going to have week 1. I mean, it's going to get a great rating. And that's going to be the focus here. Because the average fan doesn't want to hear about this. They just want to see the guys play. They don't want to hear about contract disputes and things like that. So do you think that works in Parsons' favor then?
Maybe it gives them a little bit of leverage, but I think you hit on the sort of odd variable here, which is the Jerry Jones of it all. Does he even care if they're fielding the best team possible is a reasonable and open question. I would care because, quite frankly, if Micah Parsons isn't out there, I have trouble seeing this being a competitive game, but I do not pretend to understand what drives or motivates Jerry Jones in these negotiations.
I still feel like he's gonna play in week 1. And we've been sitting around here now for 3 days. We keep thinking the news is going to come down any moment.
No.
It's going to come down any moment. So let me ask you, when do you think it's going to happen? Because all the other key guys from all the other hold-ins are signed. When is it going to happen for Micah Parsons? And do you believe it's going to happen?
I still think so in the next few days because it would be too dumb not to, but that's not a good reason for the Dallas Cowboys, apparently.
Yeah, you're 100% right. All right, now let's move on to the U.S. Open, where Coco Gauff is through to the second round. But it wasn't easy. The 3rd seed took the court for her first match after hiring a new serving coach and promptly double faulted in her first game. She'd do that 10 times in all, but still managed to win in 3 sets. So, Mina, what did you see in Coco's performance last night?
I think you saw that her biggest opponent right now is still herself. The double faults continue. At one point, she had a chance to seal the deal in the 3rd, and she just couldn't. She double faulted twice, and then she did. But it was concerning to see, Frank, because, as you know, this is something she's been struggling with now for some time. 320 double faults this year. That's more than 100 more than the next player. Now, to give her some grace, you alluded to this, she did change coaches. It's the same biomechanics expert who helped Sabalenka fix her serve. So we might be seeing this process play out in real time on the court, which is fine, and maybe it'll take some time. But as far as this particular tournament, right now the early returns are a little alarming. Yeah, Gavin McMillan is that coach that you talk about. This is why you're great. You give the analytics for football, and now you're giving the analytics for tennis as well with all the double faults that she has. But you know what? It actually is improvement, believe it or not. She had a match in July, late July, up in Montreal. She had 23 double faults. Then she had another match where she had 14 double faults. So 10 actually doesn't sound too bad. But at 5-3 in the 3rd set, when you're serving for the match and you double fault twice on your service game, that's a problem. Because it's one thing to beat Isola Tomljanovic, who, what is she ranked in the, I think, 79th in the world. You want to advance through the tournament. You cannot win with all those double faults. The other interesting thing about Coco is she changes coaches as often as I change my opinion. I mean, Brad Gilbert a few years back, and then she had, it was Matt Daly, who she gets rid of just before the U.S. Open. Now it's this new coach. I think she's always searching, because I think she's really hard on herself when she loses. Because remember, Mina, she went out in the first round of Wimbledon, and now we see her in the next major. And what's happening last night? She's losing the 2nd set, and then she's really in a battle in that 3rd set, right? Still so young, by the way. I know obviously it's only a couple years since she won this tournament, but she is still a very young player. Makes sense she'd be going through different eras. Something that I found interesting, and I'm sure this has a connection to the new coach. Early in the match, she wasn't hitting that hard. Serve was like 88 miles per hour. And then by the end, she cranked it up to 117, got more into her comfort zone. So I'm curious to see in her next outing whether or not it's more like the end where she adds the velocity, or we again see her work through that. Another great stat. You're right. She went from like the high 80s to
to the 90s, and she was over 100. I mean, she absolutely kills the ball. And this guy, McMillan, he's worked with Sabalenka before, and she's improved her serve as well. So who knows really what the tournament wants. They'll never admit it. They want Coco against Sabalenka in that final. That's always fun. All right, let's take a break, but still to come, Arch Manning has a lot to prove when Texas takes on Ohio. It's time to go head-to-head with Mina in toss-up. What's first?
Toss-up, which quarterback has more to prove on Saturday? Texas's Arch Manning or Ohio State's Julian Sayin?
All right, on Saturday, we're getting number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State, the defending national champions. It's only the second time since 1950 we've had 2 teams in the top 3 playing each other in the opening week. They met in the Cotton Bowl, the national semifinals last year. Steve Sarkisian claims that 32 players from that game were on NFL rosters during training camp. That's pretty amazing. It's hard to believe. All right, so Manning has the name. I get it. So what comes with that is a lot of pressure. But the pressure seems to come when you get to the